welcome to the Deep Dive. Today, we're diving into one of the most talked about, I guess, chapters in the Quran.
Oh, definitely.
Chapter 9, Repentance.
At-Tawbah.
Or At-Tawbah. Right. And, get ready for some surprises because this chapter, it's not just about, personal reflection.
Right.
Like there's history, there's politics, there's even, conflict woven into this text.
Yeah, you're right. It's a chapter full of twists and turns, and it really does just throw you right into the deep end, I think, from the very first verse.
So no easing into things.
Yeah.
It's just straight up like this is...
It's a declaration.
Okay.
Yeah, it's a real...
This is where we stand.
Yeah, things are changing, and this is where we are.
Okay, so right off the bat, you get this sense of like a power shift.
Yes.
It's a community that's like asserting its identity, asserting its boundaries.
Absolutely.
And it makes you want to stop and ask, like, what led to this?
Yeah.
What was happening that made such a strong declaration necessary?
That's a great question. And it's a question that I think gets to the heart of how we understand religious texts, right? Within their historical context. Yeah. Because, to really grasp the weight of what's being said here in chapter 9, you kind of have to remember that, like, this was revealed in Medina during the later years of the Prophet Muhammad's life. Okay. And this was a time when the Muslim community was facing increasing opposition, sometimes even outright hostility from those who opposed this new faith.
So you've got this backdrop of tension, of conflict brewing.
Absolutely.
And that definitely adds another layer to how we interpret what comes next.
For sure.
Especially when you get to verse 5.
Yeah.
The one that's often called the sword verse.
Right.
Probably one of the most, if not the most well-known and controversial verses in the entire Quran.
Yeah.
How do we, as people living in a very different time and place, even begin to approach a verse that seems so stark, so absolute in its language?
Yeah, and it's a question that scholars have been wrestling with for centuries.
Yeah.
And there's no, simple answer.
Right.
There's not. But one thing that I think is very clear is that to just read verse 5 in isolation without thinking about the historical context, the verses that come before and after it and the broader principles of Islamic teaching, I think can lead to really dangerous misunderstandings.
So it's not as simple as just taking it literally.
No, not at all.
Okay.
No, and you see, within Islam itself, there are many different schools of thought. There are many different ways of interpreting the Quran's message.
Okay.
And when it comes to verse 5, some scholars argue that it needs to be understood within the very specific context of the armed conflicts that the Muslim community was facing at the time. That it was a call to self-defense, that it was a desperate measure in a time of existential threat and not some general license to, kill anyone who doesn't share Islamic beliefs.
So context is key.
Yes.
But even with that context, it's hard to ignore, I think, the violence that's inherent in those words. How do we reconcile that with this broader message of peace and compassion that's also central to Islam?
And it's a tension that I think, runs throughout chapter 9.
Yeah.
It's this idea that even in the midst of conflict, even when you're faced with, aggression and hostility, the door to mercy and forgiveness is never fully closed.
So it's not just about punishment.
No.
It's also about offering a way out.
Yes.
A path to reconciliation.
Exactly. And this is where I think the complexity of the Quran and of religious texts, in general, really shines through because, yes, chapter 9 does contain those very strong pronouncements like verse 5.
Right.
But it also repeatedly emphasizes Allah's, boundless mercy and forgiveness, especially for those who are genuinely remorseful, for those who turn away from their old ways and embrace the teachings of Islam.
So it's about transformation.
Yes.
Not just punishment.
Yes.
But the possibility of changing your heart, your actions, your entire way of being in the world.
Absolutely.
Okay.
And you see this reflected, throughout the chapter, like, for example, in verse 6, where it says, "And if any one of the polytheists seeks your protection, then grant him protection so that he may hear the words of Allah.
Okay.
Then deliver him to a place of safety." Think about that for a moment.
Yeah.
Even in the midst of of this conflict. There's this emphasis on providing safety, on allowing people to hear the message of Islam without coercion.
There's a generosity.
Yes.
A recognition of shared humanity.
Yes.
That I think often gets lost in how we talk about these texts.
It's a crucial point. And it speaks to the dangers of, just taking verses out of context or interpreting them in a vacuum, right?
Right.
The Quran is a complex text. Yeah. It's full of nuance and even like apparent contradictions.
Right.
But to truly understand its message, I think we have to wrestle with those complexities. We have to hold the harshness and the mercy, the judgment and the forgiveness in tension with one another.
It's like that idea that God is both just and merciful.
Yes.
Capable of immense wrath, but also boundless compassion.
Exactly.
And it's not really our place to pick and choose which aspects of the divine we prefer. We have to grapple with the whole picture.
You have to grapple with the whole picture. And that grappling, that wrestling with difficult questions and challenging ideas, I think is where the real growth happens, both intellectually and spiritually. It's interesting you bring that up because chapter 9 really doesn't shy away from those seemingly contradictory aspects of faith.
Yeah.
In fact, it kind of leans into them.
Okay.
Take, for example, how it deals with the whole concept of repentance.
Okay.
You have this very, stark depiction of divine judgment, but then like woven throughout, you find these incredible verses about Allah's willingness to forgive, to offer a second chance, even to those who have like strayed really far from the path.
It's not a one-way street to condemnation.
Just not. No.
There's this whole other lane, so to speak, where the possibility of redemption is always present.
Yes. And what I think is really striking is that it's not just about this like individual repentance.
Okay.
Right? Chapter 9 also really highlights the role of the community in supporting one another on that journey back to righteousness. It's like this, this beautiful tapestry where individual accountability is kind of interwoven with communal support and forgiveness.
That resonates with me, that idea that we're not in this alone.
No.
That we're part of something larger.
Yeah.
That can both, challenge us to be better.
Right.
And also like catch us when we fall.
Yeah.
It's like having this safety net of compassion, even in the midst of these like really intense discussions about conflict and divine judgment.
Yeah, it's a powerful reminder that even in a chapter that seems as focused on conflict as chapter 9 is, there's this undercurrent of hope, this belief in the possibility of transformation, both for individuals and for the community as a whole.
So we've got this fascinating tension between divine judgment and divine mercy.
Yes.
But then there's also this other like layer of complexity here, which is this relationship between belief and action.
Yes.
Right. It's one thing to say like, I believe this thing.
Right.
But it's another thing entirely to live it out.
To live it out.
Especially when it comes at a cost.
Yeah. Yeah.
And chapter 9 does not let anyone off the hook when it comes to putting your faith into action.
No, it doesn't. And you're hitting on a key theme here because, remember how we talked about the historical context of this chapter?
Right.
The fact that like the Muslim community was facing very real threats at the time.
Okay.
Well, that context comes like sharply into focus when we look at how chapter 9 addresses this call to military mobilization.
Okay.
This idea of striving in the way of Allah through physical struggle.
Right. This is where things get really real.
Yes.
Really tangible.
Yes, absolutely.
It's not just about, prayer and ritual anymore.
Right.
It's about, defending the community, like literally putting your life on the line.
Yes.
For what you believe in.
And what I find so fascinating is how the text acknowledges the very like human range of emotions that come with that call to action.
Right.
You have these moments of incredible bravery and selflessness.
Yeah.
But then you also have those who hesitate, who make excuses, who wrestle with fear and doubt.
It's that like raw honesty that I find so compelling.
Yeah.
These weren't just like robotic followers blindly, obeying orders.
No.
They were real people grappling with what it meant to live out their faith in the face of danger.
Yeah.
In the face of uncertainty.
Absolutely.
It makes you wonder what was going through their minds. How they reconciled their own very human fears with this call to sacrifice.
You're right to point that out, and the text itself actually gives us these little glimpses into those internal struggles.
Okay.
There's this one verse 81, that always stands out to me.
Okay.
Where it talks about those who try to excuse themselves from fighting by saying, do not go forth in the heat.
Wait, they're seriously using the weather as an excuse to avoid a battle.
I know.
That's kind of hilarious.
It is. But it also reveals, I think, a deeper truth about human nature, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like it's easy to pledge allegiance when things are comfortable, when there's no real risk involved.
Yeah.
But true faith, I think, is tested in those moments when we're asked to step outside of our comfort zones.
Yeah.
When we're asked to sacrifice our own well-being for something larger than ourselves.
And chapter 9 doesn't let them get away with that kind of like half-hearted commitment, does it?
Not at all.
No.
Not at all. And the very next part of that verse says, say, the fire of hell is more intense than heat. If only they could understand. It's like this stark wake-up call, this reminder that the challenges of this world pale in comparison to the potential consequences of neglecting your duty to God and to the community.
It's a powerful reminder that faith isn't just about feeling good or going through the motions.
Yeah.
It's about aligning your actions with your beliefs, even when it's hard.
Yes.
Even when it's scary, even when it means like facing down your own fears and insecurities.
Absolutely. And what's remarkable is that while the chapter challenges those who, make excuses, it also acknowledges that, not everyone is in the same position to contribute in the same way.
Okay.
There's this beautiful verse 91, that specifically exempts the weak, nor on the sick, nor on those who have nothing to give from the obligation to fight.
So it's about recognizing that everyone has something to offer.
Yes.
Even if it's not always on the battlefield.
Yes.
That there are different ways to contribute to the well-being of the community.
Precisely. And even for those who are, physically unable to fight.
Yeah.
The chapter emphasizes the importance of a sincere heart,
yes,
a genuine desire to support the cause, even if their actions are limited by circumstances beyond their control.
I'm thinking about that moving passage, verse 92.
Yes, yeah.
That describes those who like desperately wanted to join the fight.
Yes.
But couldn't afford, the journey or the supplies.
Yeah.
You could feel their heartache, their longing to be a part of something larger than themselves.
Yeah, it's such a poignant reminder that true faith isn't about, outward appearances or grand gestures. It's about the sincerity of our intentions, the willingness to sacrifice what we can, even if it's just, a small act of devotion or a heartfelt prayer.
It's those like quiet acts of faith.
Yes.
Those unseen sacrifices.
Yes.
That often speak the loudest, wouldn't you say?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. And it's in those moments, I think, that the humanity of this chapter, the timelessness of its message really shines through. Right? It's a reminder that even in the midst of these grand historical events, in the midst of discussions about, war and peace and divine judgment and divine mercy, it's often the small, quiet moments of human connection, of compassion and understanding that truly resonate across the centuries.
And those moments of connection aren't limited to those who are like on the front lines,
that's right,
so to speak.
Yeah.
Right. Chapter 9 also addresses those who stayed behind.
Right.
Those who were in a position to offer support to the community, but might have, hesitated or even like outright refused.
You're right. And here we see a different tone. Yeah.
In the chapter, a much firmer stance when it comes to those who withhold their support out of selfishness, or the lack of true commitment.
It's one thing to be unable to contribute,
Right.
But it's another thing entirely to be unwilling.
That's right.
And chapter 9 doesn't let that distinction go unnoticed.
It does not. There's this very, very direct call out, I guess, in verse 93, where it talks about those who ask you for exemption, although they are rich. They are content to be with those who stay behind.
So they're prioritizing their own comfort and security over the well-being of the community.
Yes.
Essentially choosing to sit on the sidelines while others are risking their lives.
And the chapter makes it very clear that this kind of indifference has consequences.
And it's not just about earthly repercussions. There's this sense that their choice to turn away from the community struggle also has spiritual implications.
Yeah.
Exactly. Remember how we talked about the heart being so central to the Islamic understanding of faith? Well, verse 93 states that about those who stay behind out of selfishness, Allah has sealed their hearts so they do not know.
That's a chilling thought.
It is.
To be so cut off from your own capacity for compassion.
Right.
So blinded by self-interest.
Yeah.
That you no longer even recognize the needs of those around you.
It's a stark reminder that true faith requires more than just, words or rituals.
Right.
It demands action, a willingness to step outside of our comfort zones and contribute to something larger than ourselves.
Right.
And when we neglect that call to action, when we prioritize our own comfort over the well-being of others, we risk losing touch with something essential within ourselves.
It's like we're seeing the human side of building a community.
Yes.
You've got these high ideals, this call to unity and sacrifice.
Right.
But then you've also got the realities of human nature.
Yeah, absolutely.
The selfishness, the fear, the temptation to take the easy way out.
Absolutely. And chapter 9 does not shy away from those, those kind of messy realities. Yeah. In fact, I would say it tackles them head on in those verses about the desert Arabs.
Ah, yes.
Yeah.
That's a section I wanted to make sure we get to.
Okay.
Who were these desert Arabs?
Yeah.
And why are they singled out in this chapter?
Well, it's important to remember that at the time that this chapter was revealed, the Muslim community wasn't this homogenous group, all on the same page, so to speak.
Right.
You had those who had been with the Prophet Muhammad from the early days in Mecca.
Right.
Those who joined the movement later on in Medina.
Right.
And then you had those who were kind of living on the outskirts.
Cool. In the deserts, surrounding the city.
Okay.
And many of these were, Bedouin tribes who were, still kind of figuring out where they fit in with this new faith.
So a real mix of backgrounds, histories, levels of commitment.
Absolutely.
To this still developing faith.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And the verses about the desert Arabs, I think, are particularly concerned with the sincerity, of their embrace of Islam.
Okay.
There's this sense that some might be trying to play both sides.
Okay.
To benefit from the community's growing strength without fully embracing its teachings or making the sacrifices that were demanded of them.
It's like they want the perks of belonging without any of the costs.
Yeah, you could say that.
Okay.
For example, verse 97 doesn't it doesn't mince words.
It states that that the Bedouins are steeped in disbelief and hypocrisy and more likely to be unaware of the limits of what Allah has revealed to his messenger.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's a pretty blunt assessment.
It is. Yeah. And then you have verse 98, which talks about those who kind of see their contributions to the community as a kind of insurance policy.
Right.
They give.
Okay.
But not out of genuine faith or generosity. It's more they're waiting for a turn of events in their favor.
So it's transactional for them.
Yes.
Not transformational.
Exactly.
Their faith is a means to an end.
Yes.
Not an end in itself.
Precisely.
Yeah.
And that kind of calculated approach to faith, I think, really, really clashes with the chapter's emphasis on sincerity, on aligning your actions with your inward beliefs.
But it's not like every single person from the desert as being like lumped into this category.
Right, and you're right to point that out because the text itself actually acknowledges that diversity within the desert Arab communities.
Okay.
It doesn't, paint everyone with the same brush.
Okay.
Verse 99 speaks about those who are praised for their sincere faith, describing them as, those who believe in Allah in the last day and who take what they spend as a means of nearness to Allah and a means of strengthening the prayers of his messenger.
So even within this one group that's being, kind of like scrutinized here, there's this recognition that faith is a spectrum.
Yes.
You've got those who are in it for the right reasons.
Right.
And then you've got those who are still trying to like game the system.
Yeah, it's a reminder that you can't make blanket statements about, entire groups of people.
Yeah.
That there's always nuance, there's always a diversity of perspectives.
Right. And motivations.
It's about looking at the heart, right?
Yes.
At the individual's intention, their commitment.
Yes.
Rather than, making assumptions based on where they come from, what group they belong to.
Exactly. And that's a message that feels incredibly relevant, even today, right?
Yeah.
In a world where it's so easy to fall into the trap of stereotyping and prejudice.
As we've been talking about chapter 9,
I've
been struck by how relevant so many of these themes feel.
Right.
Even though they were, revealed centuries ago in a very, very different time and place.
Right.
It's like those core human struggles with faith, with doubt, with hypocrisy.
Yes.
The desire to belong.
Yeah.
The tension between our ideals and our actions.
Right.
Those are things we're still grappling with today.
It speaks to the enduring power of these texts, right?
Yeah. Their ability to transcend time and place and speak to something deep within the human experience.
It really does.
Yeah.
We've only scratched the surface of chapter 9.
We have, yeah.
But even this glimpse has revealed so much.
It has.
About the early Muslim community, the challenges they faced, the questions they grappled with, the very human tapestry of faith, of doubt, and everything in between.
And that's what makes, studying these texts so rewarding, so endlessly fascinating.
Right.
They challenge us to think critically, to wrestle with difficult questions, to confront our own assumptions, and to emerge with a more nuanced understanding, not just of the past, but of ourselves and the world around us.
It's a journey of discovery.
It is.
And like any good journey, it's often, the unexpected detours. Yeah. The moments that challenge our preconceived notions.
That's right.
That lead to the most profound insights.
Absolutely.
So to our listeners, if this deep dive into chapter 9 has sparked your curiosity,
please,
we encourage you to keep exploring.
Yeah.
Seek out different interpretations, engage with diverse perspectives.
Yes.
And most importantly, don't be afraid to ask the hard questions.
That's right.
Until next time, keep diving deep.